This is the story of how a friendship became a bitter rivalry, and how West Africa's most powerful alliance is quietly falling apart. Since late 2024, over 1,300 Nigerians has been evacuated from Niger Republic. They aren't fleeing a war zone. They are escaping a diplomatic disaster created by their own government. For decades, the bond between Nigeria and Niger was unbreakable. They share a language, a faith, and family ties that run deeper than any colonial border. Late former President Buhari even spent billions on railways and pipelines to connect them. But all that shattered in July 2023. When Niger's military took power, Nigeria's President Tinubu chose confrontation instead of brotherhood. This video breaks down how one catastrophic decision triggered the biggest crisis in West African unity, why Niger and its allies are building their own bloc, and what this means for the end of Western powers in Africa. This is what diplomatic failure looks like. Every few weeks, a plane lands in Nigeria carrying citizens who have been forced to abandon their lives in Niger Republic. These aren't refugees of war. They are victims of political fallout. So what went wrong? When Niger's military took over in July 2023, it didn't just overthrow a president. It shattered decades of harmony. Nigerians who have lived peacefully in Niger for years suddenly face hostility. They were seen as the face of an enemy government. Why? Because Nigeria, leading ECOWAS, chose the path of maximum pressure. Instead of dialogue, President Tinubu's government hit Niger with crippling sanctions. It cut off electricity, sealed the border, and threatened to invade. This wasn't just a political strategy. It was an attack on a border nation. Northern Nigerian states like Kano and Katsina have more in common with Niger than with southern Nigeria. They share the Hausa language, Islamic faith, and family bonds. But Tinubu's aggressive stance turned these natural allies into adversaries, forcing ordinary people to choose between their homes and their safety. While traditional leaders pleaded for peace, Nigeria's government chose to follow Western orders over African brotherhood, sparking crises that will spiral out of control. While Nigeria's leaders were defending the old ways, a new fire was spreading across the Sahel. At the heart of it is Captain Ibrahim Traoré, Burkina Faso's 37-year-old leader. He said what millions of young Africans were thinking: enough of foreign control, enough of puppet leaders, enough of our wealth flowing to Europe while our people suffer. When Traoré took power, he didn't just change a government, he changed the game. He kicked out French troops and demanded that foreign companies share mining profit with the people. His message went viral. When Niger's General Chiani and Mali's Colonel Goita came to power, they followed this same playbook. Together, they formed the Alliance of Sahel States, a new power bloc built to challenge both ECOWAS and Western control. The appeal is electric. Across the continent, from Lagos to Nairobi, young people share clips of Traoré's speeches demanding African sovereignty. But this is where Nigeria revealed its biggest weakness. Despite its power, Nigeria chose to defend the old neo-colonial system, the very system that keeps Africa poor. This created a massive generational clash, a battle for Africa's soul, with Nigeria finding itself on the wrong side of history. The contrast is stunning. Nigeria's late former president, Buhari, was from Daura, right on the Niger border. He understood the connection because he lived it. He spoke the language, had family ties, and spent billions strengthening the bond with projects like the Kano-Maradi Railway and a shared oil pipeline. He knew Nigeria and Niger were one people, separated by a line on a map. When Buhari joked that Niger people would defend him, he was serious about their deep personal connection. Then came Bola Tinubu. When the coup happened, Tinubu, as the new head of ECOWAS, had a choice. He could have used Nigeria's special relationship with Niger to mediate, to find an African solution. Instead, he outsourced his policy to the West. He unleashed the harshest sanctions in ECOWAS history, cutting off Niger's power supply and closing every border. It wasn't diplomacy. It was an attempt to economically strangle a neighbor. The same country Buhari had invested billions in was now an enemy. It was a catastrophic blunder, born from a deep misunderstanding of his own region and a desire to please Western powers over his African brothers. While the government in Abuja was beating the drums of war, the Nigerian people were sending a very different message. The backlash was immediate and powerful. No to war, yes to brotherhood. In the city of Kano, massive crowds marched with both Nigerian and Nigerian flags, chanting "Nigerians are our brothers." The images went viral, proving to the world that Tinubu's threat didn't have the backing of his own people. They knew a war against Niger would be a war against their own families. Social media exploded. Influencers, activists, and everyday citizens argue that Nigeria and Niger should be fighting terrorists together, not each other. Lawyers reminded President Tinubu that he couldn't declare war without the approval of the National Assembly. The pushback worked. The Nigerian Senate officially rejected Tinubu's request to deploy troops, a stunning public defeat. Pan-Africanists online who once criticized Nigeria were now celebrating Niger's defiance. The message from the ground up was crystal clear. Nigerians wanted peace, but their government had already lit a fire it couldn't control. Behind the political drama, an economic war was raging, one that will reshape the future of West Africa forever. The Sahel States weren't just living a political bloc, they were breaking the economic chains of colonialism. Niger made the first move. It revoked the licenses of a French company that had been mining its uranium for decades. This was huge. France depends on Niger's uranium to power its nuclear reactors, which provide 70% of its electricity. By taking back its mines, Niger showed that African resources would now serve African interests first. This sent shockwaves across the region. Europe's multi-billion-dollar plan for a trans-Saharan gas pipeline running through Niger to replace Russian gas was suddenly in jeopardy. Their energy security plan had just run into a war of African sovereignty. And right on cue, Russia and China stepped in to fill in the void, offering security deals and infrastructure investment without the colonial baggage. For Nigeria, the fallout was massive. Billions in cross-border trade were disrupted. The historic trade corridor from Kano to the rest of West Africa was choked. The old model, where Africa exports raw materials and imports finished goods, was collapsing, and Nigeria was caught defending the ruins. When Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso officially quit ECOWAS, it was a final blow. The Economic Community of West African States, created in 1975 to unify the region, was now seen by many as a club for presidents, enforcing Western interests instead of African ones. At their summit, the three leaders were blunt. Niger's General Chiani called ECOWAS a threat. Burkina Faso's Captain Ibrahim Traoré declared the era of Western powers telling us what to do is over. Their new Alliance of Sahel States was presented as a genuine African-led alternative. The security fallout was immediate. With Niger gone from the Joint Task Force against Boko Haram, cooperation crumbled. New terror groups began exploiting the gaps, turning the border into a free-for-all zone. But out of this crisis, something new is being born. The alliance is already planning its own currency and a common defense pact, all without Western approval. For ECOWAS, the question is existential. How can you be a symbol of African unity when you are seen as a tool of foreign powers? How can you have authority when three members walked out? As the old ECOWAS dies, a new map of power in Africa is being redrawn. As 2025 unfolds, Nigeria is living with the consequences. The evacuees coming home are a constant reminder of the human cost of choosing foreign approval over African brotherhood. The security crisis is also growing. A new terror group is gaining ground on the border, thriving in the chaos created by the diplomatic breakdown. But this disaster is also an opportunity. It is a moment for Nigeria to ask itself some hard questions. Can it learn to lead with respect instead of force? Can it build partnership based on shared African goals, not outside demands? The revolutionary energy sweeping the Sahel, led by figures like Traoré, isn't going away. It represents a generation demanding re-independence. The urgent question for Nigeria is, will it join this movement for a new Africa, or will it be left behind, clinging to a dying system? The quiet collapse of ECOWAS is a warning. Nigeria's next choice will determine whether it leads Africa's future or becomes a relic of its past. This has been Frontline Africa. What do you think Nigeria should do next? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more unfiltered analysis on the forces reshaping our world, make sure you subscribe and turn on those notifications. I am Ezekiel Enejeta. Until next time, keep questioning the official story.